Arman on finite element simulation of stiffened top and seat angles for self-centering connections.
First of all, good afternoon everyone, and thanks to the session chair. I am Arman. I recently completed my master's from UBC Okanagan. Currently I am working as research assistant with Dr. Arman. And today I'm going to share one simple idea that we came up during my master's study to improve the seismic performance of self-centering structures. So the title will say everything. That the title of my presentation is the finite element simulation of stiff and top and seat angles for self-centering connections. My co-authors are Arman and Arman. This is the outline of my presentation. First of all, I'll go through the research background and the methodology that I followed, and then some parametric study based on factorial analysis. And based on the analysis, some result and discussion, and conclusion at the end. We all know that during 1994 Northridge earthquake, steel moment resisting frames experienced brittle fracture in more than 100 moment resisting frames, and those fractures were brittle and mostly concentrated on the bottom portion of that beam column connection. And the reason behind that was mostly due to the low rotational capacity of the weld that we used to use for designing those connections. Therefore, new generation structures are supposed to be designed based on capacity design principles, and according to Pauli and Priestley, we know that the strength of a chain can be defined as the strength of its weakest link. That means if we intentionally provide some weakest link in our moment resisting frame, which will be damaged during seismic activity, by that way we can protect some of our structural main components. And based on this idea, all existing structures were repaired by using some of the techniques, as we all know, such as reduced beam sections. But the problem with this existing structure is that although we can modify those connections to create that weakest link, still it will have some residual deformation after the earthquake or seismic activity. That leads to the replacement of those structures, which might not be economical. So the new generation structures actually can be represented by self-centering structures. So more research is actually focused into these kinds of structures, where suppose in the steel beam column connections, if we apply some post-tension strain at the end and pre-compress the whole connection, the whole connection will self-center. But the problem is, in that kind of self-centering, there will be no energy dissipation. For that reason, in this kind of connection, we can add some energy dissipating element, and this will be the weakest link of our connection, which will dissipate energy, and it should be repairable or replaceable after the earthquake, so that the total overall behavior of these two components should be like this, which will be self-centering and at the same time will dissipate sufficient energy to decrease the displacement demand. And based on this self-centering connection idea, in my study I tried to actually focus on this element, that is the energy dissipating element. As we all know that Dr. Rickels actually did some study on interior beam column connection. So for my study, I choose one interior beam column connection, which was tested by him and his colleagues. First of all, I choose one connection which is PC4 according to their experimental plan, and it was consisted of one strong column, 2 beam flanges, and 8 high strength steel strands, 4 top and seat angles. Those are top and seat angles as named it, and some shear plates, high strength bolts, and some flange reinforcing plates were there. Based on the experimental data that I collected from that study, I developed finite element model in ANSYS mechanical APDL platform. Solid 185 and mesh 200 elements were used to generate solid elements and generate mesh. Both standard and bonded contacts were defined between the components to represent the actual test setup. Pre-tension force was applied on the strand and the bolts. And here you can see that based on my finite element analysis results, the finite element result Here I presented two specimens that I modeled with ANSYS, and we can see that this finite element model is quite close to the actual representation. And after doing this study, I focused on the energy dissipating element, and this is actually the top end seat angle. So in this study, I tried to add one steel plate. Here we named it as stiffener. So I added this additional stiffener to see whether we can improve the load carrying capacity and energy dissipation capacity of this energy dissipating element, which will contribute to the overall performance of the connection. And some parameters that we should remember, which is angle thickness. As we know, I considered another parameter, that is stiffener thickness. And one most important parameter in case of top end seat angle is the distance from this base to the edge of the bolt, and we call it gauge length. So after modifying the finite element model, I did some parametric study. That is, I tried to use different stiffener thickness to see the effect on the overall load deformation behavior. As you can see that when we are increasing the thickness of the stiffener, the load capacity as well as the energy dissipation capacity of the connection is increasing. But in the last case, where I added one 4 millimeter thick stiffener, you can see that although the parameters are increasing, at the same time there are some residual deformation. And the residual deformation is actually coming from the out of plane deformation of the beam flanges, because the model that I modified, it wasn't designed for that additional compressive force that was exerted by that stiffener, and therefore there are some plastic deformation. That means we have to model the beam if we want to modify the top end seat angle. Another parameter that I considered was the gauge length. As I told you, this is very important because Garlop already studied experimentally this specimen, and she mentioned that gauge length is an important factor. And here we can see that I presented the result in terms of GT. GT actually is G by T ratio that they call it. G is the gauge length and T is the thickness. So if the thickness is fixed, if we increase the gauge length, that means the G by T ratio will increase. So I increase the gauge length for 3 different models, and as you can see, for the longest gauge length, we are getting a little bit higher capacity, but the problem with the previous model, there were some residual deformation, but here we can see that with all those parameters fixed, the cell centering is still achievable, and I'll discuss this at the end, but this gauge length is actually a very important parameter for this kind of modified top and seat angle. And next, as I told you that when we are adding stiffener, there are some plastic deformation in the beam flanges. So I tried to solve this issue by adding different thickness of reinforcing plate in the bottom portion of the beam flange. But I considered two different thickness, but as you can see, there is no difference here, because actually the result that I meant to show is not showing here. Like for this model, if we add additional reinforcing plate, it won't help much. The residual deformation will be there, and the reason behind is that if we add additional reinforcing plate here, then the deformation starts occurring at the end of that plate. That means this is not a solution for this. For solving this issue, we have to design the beam for the additional force, the whole section. Based on my preliminary study, and then I focused solely on the angle, and for that I chose one study by Garlop. She did in 2002. She tested only the top and seat angle, and the experimental setup was like this. One column was connected with the beam, and 2 angle was connected on the side. This column was actually in horizontal shape. That means it was a fixed column, and load was applied in vertical direction. So we can see the load deformation behavior of the angle. And she tested 7 experimental specimens, as you can see here, with 3 different thickness. That is 7.9, 15.9, and 19 millimeter. One additional specimen was with no washer. There is a washer plate, and she mentioned that if there is washer plate, it defines the line and based on that line, you can have a smooth response in the load deformation behavior. But she tested one connection with no washer 2 to see the effect of washer. And in my study, I developed the finite element model based on experimental results, experimental data, and since the column didn't expect any deformation, and they also mentioned that there was no deformation in the column, I used linear elastic material for the column and the beam, and for angle, I used angle and bolts. I used a trilinear kinetic model. And if you see the validation results, those are all 6 experimental specimens that I tried to simulate through finite element. And as you can see that they all captured the load deformation behavior quite closely, but in some cases I couldn't capture the effect. And in this case, actually, the specimen failed after this cycle. So since I validated the top and seat angle, then I modified that connection with 2 different arrangement of stiffener to see if we can minimize the amount of material, steel material there. But as you can see that by adding stiffener through half length, we can increase the capacity, but it's only around 20%. But if we put it throughout the length or height, then we can increase up to 82% of its load capacity, as well as the energy dissipation capacity will be higher. And for the thickness of the stiffener, I tried different thickness, and actually after certain thickness, the load capacity don't increase that much, so I limited it up to 5 millimeter. So for full, since the model was small and it was computationally efficient to use the full model, so I did full factorial analysis for my model, and 4 different factors with 2 different levels were considered. In total, there was 16 models, and the parameters that I considered was the stiffener thickness, yield strength, gauge length, and angle thickness. Based on the result, as you can see, for higher thickness of angle, it's obvious that load carrying capacity will increase, but as you can see that we can actually vary these other parameters and control the load capacity as well as the energy dissipation capacity. So that was one finding from my study, and another finding that I will show in the next slide is that for the low level I considered 12.7 millimeter thick angle, but if you see in this one I just showed 3 random models. In the last one, the angle thickness was 12.7 millimeter, and this is the response model line. And the red one was actually the experimental results from Carlo, and that one was with 15.9 millimeter thick angle. As you can see that even with thinner angle, by controlling the gauge length and the stiffener thickness and other parameters, we can get higher capacity. This actually is also applicable for existing structure. We can increase the capacity of an angle by adding additional stiffener from outside. So this concept might help in future. And for 2 other models, we also can see that if we increase the thickness of the angle and if we reduce the gauge length, it will improve the overall performance, that is the load carrying capacity, also the energy dissipation capacity of the angle. So this was the study that I did, and based on this study, we can easily conclude that the finite element results were consistent with the experimental results. By adding stiffener, enhanced behavior can be achieved. And increasing stiffener thickness leads to higher capacity and higher energy dissipation, but we have to limit the thickness so that we can get the optimum amount of material to optimize the connection parameters. And increase the gauge length can have a negative effect on the energy dissipation capacity, but it removes the residual deformation. As I was mentioning, that if we increase the thickness of the stiffener, there will be some residual deformation, but that residual deformation can be actually minimized by increasing the gauge length. So by playing with these 2 parameters, we can actually increase the overall capacity of that angle. And And as I mentioned, that with smaller angle, we can get higher capacity and higher energy dissipation if we design it. And the G/T ratio is actually the most important parameter in this kind of energy dissipating element, that is top and seed angle. So it should be carefully designed. And Carlock in her study already mentioned that actually the gauge length, we can, if we shorten the gauge length, it will increase the capacity of the angle. But in that case, under cyclic loading, it might experience early fatigue failure. So we have to find out a limit where the gauge length is high enough to self-center the connection, and the thickness is high enough to maximize the overall energy dissipation capacity and also the load carrying capacity. So this was actually our initial study. We are going to do some experimental study, and we wanted to understand how the addition of stiffener affects the overall performance. And before finishing, those are the references that I used, and I would like to acknowledge my research group, Alons and Microsystem and Compute Canada for their facility to do this study. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. We have some questions? Yes, sir.
I'm not too familiar with the system. How do you decouple the concrete slab of affecting all those stiffness, very sensible variables?
Oh, actually, that's a quite different study, because we want to create some gap opening in between these two, that is beam and column. So yeah, so if we just look at here, if this is a column and this is a beam, if it tries to open a gap in between them, obviously it will interact with that slab, additional slab which is connected with that beam plane. So this is completely a different study, but Garlock and some other researcher already looked into that. We can we can restrain in one side of that slab and keep it open on the other side where we are expecting the gap opening. That can be one option. Or for some study, they mentioned that we can, the top portion, we can use one coupler on the top portion and coupler on the bottom portion, so the slab will also behave the same that it's happening here. So, but still, it's an active research area, because we have to overcome that issue for sure if we want to implement this one. So I don't have that much experience on this.
Just for a reminder that when we are increasing the stiffness, the rotational stiffness of the connection, for example, by increasing the location of the bolt, as you mentioned, it brings more demands on the column, because the column, in most of the cases, is not designed for the bending moment, because this is a kind of pin connection for the designers. So be careful when you are increasing the rotational stiffness of the connections by adding, for example, more bolts, or by increasing the height of the bolt. So we have to redesign the column for additional bending.
Thank you for suggesting that. Yeah, we should look into that.
We have time for one more question. Anyone have another question? I'll ask a brief one. So what does the failure mode look like for this compared to the ones that Garlock tested? Are you expecting that the stiffener is yielding in tension?
Yeah.
So does the weld affect, the weld between the stiffener and the angle, is that going to affect the behavior of this device?
Yeah, that's why we want to do some experimental study, because I didn't model that well. But yeah, we can connect the stiffener without welding too. So that can be another option, like extending the plate and connecting to the bolt with that angle. So we will look into that during our experiment. That's all.
Thank you very much.